Now I'll invite our speaker, Dr. Shivshankar Reddy sir. He has completed his MBBS from KMC Kurnool, MD and DM from prestigious institute NIMHANS Bangalore.
Thank you, Vaishnavi, for introducing me. The topic which we chosen is that so Pavitra spoken mainly about the acute issues and the issues which follows maybe few days after acute COVID infection. I'm talking about slightly more long-term issues, not very long-term, but at least medium-term. Maybe few months after acute COVID infection, what happens? So we looked at some of the interesting findings. It is evolving field, so we are also learning day in and day out how it progresses. As more information is unraveling, we are also learning new things. So, with our Herculean efforts in the last 1.5 years, we are relatively successfully flattening the curve. Although the Delta virus epidemic is going on in few countries. So, COVID, the curve has flattened. It has left many scars, both physically and psychologically. And now the next question is this: does the morbidity in the acute phase extend beyond the morbidity extend beyond the acute phase? So this is an interesting phase, interesting question to put across. Or does it follow the patterns in earlier pandemics? We had in 18th century plague. In 19th century we have Spanish flu. In 19th century we have Asian cholera. In 20th century we have Spanish flu, and then the SARS and MERS. So in 2002 and 2012 respectively, and how they left the psychological scarring, and how the people suffered in waves in terms of severe psychiatric illness and common psychiatric illness. They follow the same pattern. We are yet to find out. So we are convinced now that there are increasing reports in the journals and media that COVID survivors are facing a lot of issues in day-to-day lives. And one of the important organ which is contributing to morbidity is nervous system, and the immune structure is mind. So many COVID survivors which come to our clinics day in day out do express that they are not able to focus, they are having very loss of energy, they are not able to initiate the activities, and they are not able to concentrate as before. So the common features we see, and some people have sleep problems, myalgias. So all these things are concerning to us. And as a mental health professional, we have a unique role in playing preventive and also in treatment role of these addressing these sequelae. So coming to this, does post-COVID phase people are at high risk of neuropsychiatric illness? The answer is right now yes. Does severity of COVID-19 have an effect on subsequent development of neuropsychiatric illness? The answer is yes. How long this risk remain after COVID-19 infection? This answer is still awaited. Still, there are ongoing studies now. So the recent reports a cause of concern. There is a recent article which says 1 in 3 of COVID-19 recovered patients have reported neuropsychiatric symptoms. And there is a recent Google Trends which have searched. They see every time there is a small peak, small increase in cases in the community. You see number of searches of COVID-19 and mental health has gone up. The 100% is the highest popularity at that time. The COVID and mental health is the highest during August 2020. And from then on, you see small peaks keep on growing again. Recent May 2021, when there is second wave in India, again the trends have increased and it's still going on. So this reflects the people are so much concerned about their mental health after COVID and during COVID. So how the virus enters the nervous system, how it gains entry, how it damages the nervous system. Already Pavitra has alluded to it. I will just point out one interesting things. So that is angiotensin convertase enzyme inhibitor ACE2 receptors. How it facilitates the morbidity. So these receptors are located in the nervous system, preferentially located in the vasculature and also neurons and glial cells. It is more so abundantly present in the frontal lobe and frontal lobe vasculature. So once virus attacks these receptors, they undergo either reduction or inactivation. So the primary role of these receptors is controlling hypertension and maintaining the healthy state of the brain. Once these receptors are inactivated, there will be accelerated atherosclerosis and accelerated hypertension in the CNS. And also it promotes the pro-inflammatory states. All these two things subsequently increases the vascular events, and also pro-inflammatory state contribute to degeneration and also autoimmune etiology, which is contributing to psychiatric morbidity. Hypoxia, one more thing which has been much talked about during the acute COVID, which have long-term effects in the form of patient being the images which are done during the acute phase and even after 3 months reported vascular changes, micro bleeds, macro bleeds, white matter hyperintensities, and parenchymal bleeds. So all these suggest that there is neurological role of it. And not ignoring the psychological reasons, most importantly, the themes, like people voicing out they are living in a limbo, like they travel between life and death. They don't know what to do. Fear of rejection. Once they recovered and go to their families, they fear that whether they will be accepted or they will be accepted in the peer group. For example, a student develops a COVID and recovers and joins the classroom. He will be accepted or not. This fear still linger around. Life in turmoil, losing jobs, losing income, forced absenteeism, patients were forced to take leaves, patients were paid half salaries. So this kind of turmoil. So and stigma related, people doesn't leave the stigma easily. People be still afraid that the COVID patient recently at home. So they don't go to that route. They don't go talk to them. So this is the kind of discrepancy we see, and lack of social and emotional support because of the physical nature. I have seen many relatives or even my close friends doesn't usually talk, usually doesn't come out, so that even though there is suffering in other home, they don't usually go and support because of the understandably so many restrictions. So understandably they also have the concerns, and all people are not comfortable with digital media. So this is one of the factors playing the role. Excess concerns about health, which so-called worried well. So they are infected, they are asymptomatic, they recovered, but still they are worried about. So what will happen to them? And grief, losing the close relatives and friends, contributing to grief and suffering. And negative news, again the mass media and social media contributing to excess news. There is even a there is actually an announcement from the Karnataka Psychiatric Association pleading the media people to not to put any news which are not required and put only authentic sources. And financial crisis and slowing of economy, which is leading indirectly and directly to crisis at homes. And also there one more unique phenomenon is the lack of schools for last 1.5 year and lack of work from home for the last 1.5 year. It means that especially the housewives and women have to manage children and elderly and their spouses at home, and they'll be sandwiched between all these demands in the home, which will lead to a lot of domestic violence and psychiatric morbidity. And this is an interesting recent article which shown how the COVID, the viremia and the COVID positive status and later recovery will contribute to comorbidity. The first thing, the 1 to 2 weeks is acute viral phase. After that, it recovers patient. The first 12 weeks or 3 months is taken as a subacute phase, and followed from 3 months to 6 months taken as a chronic phase. So till now we have more of evidence from the first 3 months, and now research is evolving slowly for 6 months. So most common in terms of psychiatry, there are anxiety, depressive symptoms, sleep disturbances, cognitive disturbances, headache, PTSD has been reported, apart from a lot of physical symptoms. So psychiatric symptoms you see after COVID, insomnia is there, risk of suicide, anxiety disorders, depression, substance use, and PTSD. In terms of neurocognitive disorders, cognitive issues, and cerebrovascular accident, which is more concerning and more serious, and more commonly fatigue is also being reported across. Center for Disease Control reports 19 neuropsychiatric symptoms and physical symptoms after COVID infection. And I reviewed systematic articles and also few studies on depression and anxiety in post-COVID phase. There are totally 46 studies which reported prevalence of around 30%. The maximum 30%, depression 14%, anxiety 17%. And the duration of follow varies from day 1 to day 6 months. And mostly of the anxiety is about health anxiety mostly. And the risk is much higher during the second and third month after COVID than later or before. So importantly, these symptoms in patients are during the acute phase, the symptoms tend to improve. If otherwise patient develops later, then it may seem to more persist. And there is also correlation between inflammatory markers of interleukin 2 and depression was found, which is also reconfirming the inflammatory hypothesis of depression. And the risk factors commonly found are COVID, severity of COVID, and ICU admission. Conflicting evidence is there for gender reason. About PTSD, we all thought that there will be huge number of people with PTSD, but only few studies are reported about very high risk. More studies reported risk about 10%, 15%, not more than that. So that is interesting finding. The longest follow-up is 6 months. And risk factors of having a traumatic experience in ICU admission, or he has suffered from anxiety or depression during the acute phase. These people are more likely to have PTSD than other people. So OCD, as Sir Nagaredi sir already speaking to about people washing again and again. So the problem with OCD, who has OCD, is that they already have these obsession compulsions, and we are promoting those things by saying that to wash hands every 2 hours. So are we kind of medicalizing? Are we promoting these behaviors more? So to be honest, people who are on medication properly and during the COVID period and people with OCD actually have not been worsened that much. However, there are people who are been over have developed some OC symptoms which might lead to some consultations. So there are prevalent studies which are done which reported 20%. There are also few studies on phobias which reported about germophobia, people worried about the germs acquiring, about people virus, so people not touching any substances, people holding their hands, so people washing too many times. So these phobias also been reported in few articles. So insomnia is one of the commonest reported symptom I have seen in my clinic and also in the in articles. So the prevalence is as much as 85%. And the most common risk factor is severity of COVID, and hospitalization was an important risk factor. Fatigue, as Pavitra was saying, that fatigue is one of the widely reported symptom. It could be few multiple reasons. One is body is deconditioned. You are in hospital for 1 month in ICU setup. The body is deconditioned. They are not able to work as before, and presenting as fatigue. The other thing is having a kind of sickness behavior, the kind of abnormal illness behavior, and also because of the inflammatory state. So they all have myalgias and fatigue and kind of chronic fatigue syndrome. So these kind of picture we have seen. This is one of the commonest reported symptom. And even I have seen few marathons who used to do 10 kilometers. They say after COVID they are not able to run like that. So they're taking slowly and they're now able to run only 3 to 4 kilometers only. So this is one of the common reported symptoms. We don't have accurate treatment. Only time will tell whether they improve gradually with nutrition supplements and gradual physical recovery. So the interesting finding is that they have found that people who have high troponin level during the acute phase will more likely to have this fatigue than people who don't have this thing. The reasons could be altered HPA axis, which will reduce the person's response to stress, and this will present as a fatigue. And yeah, cognitive impairment is one buzzword we are hearing recently in news. The brain fog. What is the brain fog? Is it subjective impairment or there is something to the objective impairment also? So, it is state of reduced cognitive functioning. Studies have so far reported that up to 7 months follow-up, they reported around 20 to 25% and maximum 78%, at least one cognitive domain. The common things they report attention, memory, and executive function involvement. There are also a few conflicting reports about visuospatial involvement, language involvement, and also other functions also involvement also. But most commonly I come across attention, memory, and executive function most commonly are involved. These factors are severity of COVID, high LDH levels, CRP being positive, high systemic inflammatory index positivity during the acute phase are the contributors or indicators that you will have going to have cognitive impairment. So this is serious concern. Can COVID increase the risk of incipient Alzheimer's dementia in older adults? Few studies have looked at this question and they also say that it will definitely increase. The contributing factors are that it will accelerate the neurodegenerative process. The other is that it creates inflammatory states, thus by increasing mitochondrial activation, increase amyloid fibril formation, and also contribute to synaptic loss. This virus also known to spread from synaptic synapse, like transsynaptic transfer of virus is there. Through this also it causes some damage in the limbic region and thus by promoting the Alzheimer's pathology. So I have specifically looked at studies which have taken samples of more than 500 and follow up of 3 months, at least 3 months. So there are a lot of retrospective studies which reported that only one important finding is that people who receive admission, who are intensive care, have more psychiatric comorbidity than people who are not hospitalized or who are in a non-general care. So these people are less. There are a lot of heterogeneity in terms of kind of follow-up and kind of assessment have been used. And morely they use the data, electronic data they are using. So in terms of cohort studies, more or less they have follow-up of only up to 3 months or 4 months only. They are mostly self-questionnaire or some in ICD has been used. Mostly they reported anxiety, depression as the commonest symptom followed by insomnia. So the sample size also not very great, more less than many studies have included only people up to 1,800. So this is one of the important study which I come across. There is, you see the stroke which we are talking about, the first time. So in people in hospitalized patients, the risk is even 1.6 compared to people of respect to age, the same risk factor, except they have COVID, 1.6 times. And people in ICU admission at 2.82%. This is high, 3 times higher the risk of stroke than people who don't have other this risk factor. So this is serious concern about intratracheal hemorrhage, which is even fatal. So this is also higher. People have suffered COVID infection. So coming to the psychiatric diagnosis, you see the bottom line, all psychiatric diagnoses, there is 25% risk of psychiatric morbidity after COVID at 3 months to 4 months period. And this risk is slightly higher in patients who receive admission than who don't receive admission. And primarily, their mood and anxiety are the commonest psychiatric problems, post-COVID recovered patients. So in terms of they have compared people who have COVID infection, who have other influenza virus, who have other respiratory infection. Even then, the risk is even 1.5 times higher with COVID infection than any other infection for any psychiatric disorder. For psychotic disorder, even when interested, twice the risk, and even for dementia also. This is little concerning. So this figure says, so the blue line is for the other respiratory tract infection and red is for COVID-19. You see from time since the acute recovery, there is actually the widening of the line. It means that COVID-19, the risk remains higher. Even though you go through even 3 months also, like the 200 days, almost 6 months they have taken, the risk still remains higher compared to other respiratory infections. So even for this also, for intratracheal hemorrhage, stroke also, it remains higher. So these are things which should be kept in mind, and ask them to come for regular checkup for either physician or psychiatrist, and to check all these medical problems also when they come for visits. So important ongoing studies I want to highlight. There is one study from University of California, which are doing study on 800 patients for 2 years follow-up. The long-term impact of infection with novel coronavirus, Steve Deeks. So the results will be available by 2024. We get the interim results in 2022. So the assessment will be like every month for first 3 months, followed by every 3 months for next 2 years. So this will give a lot of answers for the difficult questions we are thinking about. And the other is long-term study of COVID-19 sequelae immunity by University of Allergy and Infectious Disease by Michael Sneller. This also, there's a component of mental health in that. We are looking for imaging findings also and mental health in that. There is interesting other long-term study from the group of Gabriel et al. On chronic neuropsychiatric sequelae, the group prospective study of viral impact on brain function. This is going to answer many of our neuropsychiatric questions, how it will be going to be impact in the long run, especially about the nervous system, about the mental health. And the key observations, what we have made from the studies is that neuropsychiatric sequelae of COVID appear to be widespread and persistent up to and probably beyond 6 months. Compared with other neurological disorders, psychiatric disorders have shown weak relationship with inflammatory markers. Psychiatric morbidity in post-COVID-19 reflects importance of psychosocial factors in addition to biological factors. So this should be addressed and should be kept in mind. However, there are a few limitations to no studies. There is heterogeneity in terms of assessment method and duration of follow. Many studies have used only survey methods. Studies are not focused much on psychosocial factors. There are paucity of studies on psychopathology. What is exactly psychopathology, depression, anxiety, PTSD? What it is exactly? Very few studies and not even attempts have started. Few studies not clearly provided any psychiatric diagnosis. They included altered mental status, encephalopathy, or like kind of insomnia, depressive symptoms like that. Not a depression they are reported. And mitigation strategies, creating awareness about psychiatric issues like what we are doing right now, or even the doctors who participated in this event, and creating awareness among their colleagues, accessibility to mental health services, using digital technology to providing services, promoting sleep hygiene measures, safe social gatherings, early detection and treatment also. These are some of the measures to mitigate or to prevent burden of mental illness in the community. So from doctors, frontline doctors who suffered and also who are doing duties and COVID duties, I usually suggest to take optimal breaks. They require rotation policy, adequate rest to sleep are important. Peer group support from and trust on other colleagues, adequate hydration, nutrition, professional health, keeping confidentiality, and mental health helplines. Like a lot of institutions started mental health helplines, private separate helpline, mental health clinic for the doctors. So these are the measures which it help. And resources, if anybody want to read more, there's a COVID-19 information source from NIMHANS, from AIIMS. And also AIIMS started, a lot of AIIMS started rehabilitation clinics for the COVID-19. So this provide mental health rehabilitation, psychiatric, and also provide a physical rehabilitation for COVID-19 record patient. CDC also provides a good website for the information on COVID and mental health and neuropsychiatric about things. Take home message is incidence of psychiatric morbidity post-COVID influences the severity of their acute phase. Like ICU is more than hospitalized, hospital is more than non-hospitalized people. Mood and anxiety is also the commonest presentation. Cognitive impairment is a concerning sequelae which needs to be further studied. And I come to the end of my presentation. It may take few decades to fully appreciate the long-term neuropsychiatric effects of COVID-19. But I recently reading an article, I come across this interesting study, schizophrenia and influenza the century of 1989. The 2020 being a century from Spanish flu. They written an article keeping in mind the COVID-19 now. And they said that after 100 years, when you look back, what are the mechanisms how Spanish flu influenced the risk of schizophrenia in people, and how it alters the NMDA, how it alters the AMPA receptors in the brain. So all those mechanisms they lucidly presented there. Now we see from now, 100 years later, then we may see the kind of impact it has on whole humanity. So with this, I end my talk. Thank you for patient listening. Please contact at this address.